Hello and welcome to Love is a Battlefield, the podcast. My name is Tilly Moore. Actually, now I'm calling it the DV podcast. Ooh, big changes. Welcome. This is episode 17. We're up to financial abuse. Yuck, yuck, yuck. I always say that when I mention the topic and how we're always talking about negative things that narcissists do. And I'm probably in the wrong genre of podcast if I keep not liking the fact that every episode is about something negative. But that's what we have to do if we're going to educate each other and share and care and learn together. Now, I just want to do a shout out today to the listeners from Holland. We've got some listeners from Holland. Now, I've tried to learn to say something in Dutch. Yeah, I can't. So it's bedankt voor het luisteren. Apologies, that might sound offensive because I'm really not good. I did try, I pressed play, I listened, I tried to repeat. I feel like I'd be good at that, but no. So I'm just going to let it play.
Bedankt voor het luisteren.
So that means thanks for listening in Dutch. So shout out to the listeners from Holland. I believe Holland is a very beautiful part of our planet to live. So thank you again to our listeners from Holland. I always say our, don't I? When it's only me by myself. I really hate the podcast with one host. It's like I need more talking. I need more sound. There's someone who has a podcast who actually won an award for it. And she's a lot like me, but she has two other people in the room so that they offer that other person to bounce off, but it's still her name and her podcast. If anyone wants to just join me and just talk with me, just so it doesn't sound like just me in an echo, that'd be great. That'd be great. So we're getting into this today. Episode 17, financial abuse. Now, according to Forbes.com, 99% of domestic violence cases include financial abuse. Now, initially when I was going to do this episode, I've put it off until episode 17 because I thought, well, that wasn't a huge part of my most recent domestic violence relationship, the worst one I've ever had. And so I've kind of put it off, even though I have had it happen in another relationship in the past. But as I read about it, I realized, oh my goodness, that's financial abuse. So I'm going to go on to show you all these things because they do. What these things they do for control, coercive control, impact you financially. So according to Forbes, yes, 99% of domestic violence cases, that's a lot. And financial abuse can begin subtly as a partner showing care and concern, but progresses over time to power and control. Now, that's most things in domestic violence, isn't it? Everything starts off loving and caring and concern, but slowly it becomes evident that it's all about power and control. And a lot of them are like they'll come home, you'll come home and say, oh, my boss or this or that. And they'll say, hey, you don't have to work. We can spend more time together if you don't work. How about you quit? I'll look after you. And then they control each and everything that you do. So here is an amazing example. Now, KL is the initials of the abuse victim, was financially dependent on her husband. He convinced her to quit her job as a fashion consultant for high-roller men so they would have more time together. He didn't open a joint bank account. She was never given a credit card of her own and was not added to his credit card. She had no access to cash or credit. If she needed to purchase something, she had to ask her husband for his credit card to make the purchase. His credit card was on her Uber account, so he could track when she used the Uber account and where she went. He had to approve every purchase she made, even groceries. If she wanted to buy a dress, she had to call him from the store, send a photo of herself in the dress, and if he liked it on her and approved, he would directly pay for the dress over the phone. If she had sex with him, he even left cash on the table. That is literally treating a woman like an object, like you are my employee, you are for sex and for serving me. And he's giving her that positive reinforcement like, oh, you did something I really liked. Here, have some cash. But withholds constantly and has that control. There are another couple of examples here I can relate to this one. Two women reported they both had husbands who refused to allow them to use the air conditioner in their homes. I can relate to that. And they also said that they had a wedding deposit in a joint account and the men stole all of it and lied that, oh, my family gave us all that money. But no. Oh, here's an example that just reeks of that power and control and their insecurities. So NM, that's the initials of one of the girls, ladies, was questioned about a $10 candle and the cost of a pair of boots. When her husband refused to purchase a baby carriage she wanted for her baby and a friend bought it for her instead, he demanded she send it back. Isn't that reeking of that ego, that insecurity, the ego and pride, and that I own you, I control you, I wanted to buy that, even though he'd refused to buy it. Yuck. And another one, a lady got a protection order against her husband. She received some benefits for their children through him, and he changed the account where the money landed so that she got none of the benefits to support the kids. Petty, ego, power, control, women are objects. That's all I'm saying. Now, financial abuse is one of the methods used by abusers to keep a survivor trapped in an abusive relationship. Survivors report that worry over their ability to provide financially for themselves and their children is one of the top reasons given for staying in or returning to an abusive partner. Many victims return to abusive relationships because they are driven by the basic necessities of life: food, water, shelter. They are not financially secure, don't have anywhere to go, and do not want to live in a shelter. Even if they're okay to live in a shelter is short term. As soon as you're there, they're like, okay, what's your plan? You need to go and pay rent. You need to get a bond. You need to get out of here. You need to be financially independent. It's not a long-term solution. Well, not in my country, certainly. They actually don't have enough shelters, not enough emergency shelters, let alone any long-term accommodation where I live. Now, Forbes.com goes on to explain that in court, these abusers claim their victims are credit card spenders who are incompetent to handle money, only care about money, and would spend incessantly on themselves, and are spendthrifts who require someone else to handle the household funds. And not shockingly, these men often have these claims of incompetence associated with claims of unfitness to parent and mental instability and illness. This goes back to the patriarchy's view that women, if they ever speak, are hysterical, mentally ill, stupid. All they want is shoes and pretty dresses. They're dumb. I have to control them. And all those negative values that the patriarchy put into people. So it's very easy for a man to convince, in 90-something% of cases, another man, because most of the judges where I live are male. So it's very easy for a man to convince a court that a woman is hysterical, she is unstable, oh yes, she spends too much money, because those are the values that our entire generation was raised with, that we're all trying to undo and say, wait a minute, women are people, women are intelligent. When a woman speaks out to stand up for herself, she is not a psycho, she's not an aggressive psychopath crazy bitch, she's a person with a voice, whereas men carry on like absolute pork chops. And that's accepted by society. So they sell that whole old patriarchal thing that she's not well, oh, she can't handle the finances, she just buys shoes and dresses, which they know they're lying, but it's all part of their game. And then it unfortunately goes on to explain that victims seeking safety and justice for themselves and their children through family court and other legal systems may instead encounter their partner's misuse of court processes to further enact coercive control and financial abuse on them. And it goes on to say that then becomes legal abuse. But I've heard of so many people getting in debt for tens and tens of thousands of dollars because family court is that expensive. I don't have too much respect for family court lawyers when I found out how much they charge for these horrible situations and how it only takes one parent to say no and push to go to court, and then the other parent has to come up with money and pay or get into massive debt. I had a friend that was, I think they were still a teenager when they had their child, and they went to court and they got like a $40,000 debt from just going to court for the child. And so I'm very blessed that with my children, I didn't have to go to court in either situations. Nearly did. But I think both of us in that situation were tired asses, and we're like, no, I'm not paying that. And I'm so glad they were on the same page as not wanting to pay that. He wanted to create trouble, drama, chaos, stress. That person was not very nice. But they did not want to spend all that money, so that is really good. It is hard when there's a situation where, because in our country you can get what's called legal aid, where someone, if they're not working or earning anything, or they're in a certain bracket of income that is low, they are eligible for getting all their court expenses paid for by the government. Whereas if someone's working, even if they're not earning much, but they're earning like a normal kind of wage, they can't. So I really feel for people who are against someone who gets it for free. So they're like, I'm just going to drag this out. I'm going to just use the court, and going through court, knowing that they actually have to pay cash to their lawyer. So I'm doing this to penalise them and financially abuse them. So that's another situation where they can financially abuse you. There is actually a website I found that lists many examples of financial abuse, and they're not even everything, but while I was reading it, I was like, what? That is too? So here we go. I'm going to read this out. Forbidding the victim to work. Sabotaging work or employment opportunities by stalking or harassing the victim at the workplace, or causing the victim to lose her job by physically battering prior to important meetings or interviews. Forbidding the victim from attending job training or advancement opportunities. Controlling how all of the money is spent, not including the victim in investment or banking decisions. Not allowing the victim access to bank accounts. Withholding money or giving an allowance. Forcing the victim to write bad checks or file fraudulent tax returns. Running up large amounts of debt on joint accounts. Refusing to work or contribute to the family income. Withholding funds for the victim or children to obtain basic needs such as food and medicine. Hiding assets. Stealing the victim's identity, property, or inheritance. Forcing the victim to work in a family business without pay. Refusing to pay bills and ruining the victim's credit score. Forcing the victim to turn over public benefits or threatening to turn the victim in for cheating or misusing benefits. Filing false insurance claims. Refusing to pay or evading child support, or manipulating the divorce process by drawing it out by hiding or not disclosing assets. Honestly, I have looked around so many other places on the internet, and there are so many other examples, even as basic as destroying, damaging, or stealing property. You know, when you have something and you really like it, and I don't know, okay, if you've been through abuse, I would like to guess that this has happened. They'll hold something up valuable to you and threaten to smash it, or they'll threaten to break something that will financially impact you, like damage the wall, or they love damaging the walls, don't they? Damaging something important to you, or they steal things. I mean, years on, I've realised things that were stolen that meant a lot to me mean absolutely nothing to them, but it was that power and control, and it was that sneaky little one day you'll realise this is missing and you'll know it was me. Like, get over yourself, mate. Like, I don't care. I'm free and not being murdered right in this minute by you. So that's a win to me. But there are so many examples of financial abuse. And honestly, when I was reading that list, I didn't even realize that an ex microwaving my work ID because he was jealous that I was going to work was anything related to financial abuse. And when it said, you know, keeping you up late and like beating you up and hurting you like the night before you have something important. Yes, when I had an early shift, he would not let me sleep. I would be on my knees begging to sleep. I would be lying in bed, not reacting at all. And if I didn't react, he just kept beating me harder and harder and harder. And I said, please let me sleep. And he's like, no, I'm not going to let you. No. And I'm like, I have so many hours to go. I need to sleep before my job. And I would talk factually like this. And no, it's logic. And he's like, no, because it was part of the control. It's I'm going to control you so that tomorrow at work you fail because you have been up all night. And there was a pattern that before certain shifts, he would keep me up till 2 a.m. being violent and not letting me sleep. And he had threatened at one stage, I will make you lose your job. I will I'll do anything I can to make you lose your job. I'll convince everyone at work to hate you. I will go in and convince your boss that you're crazy. Everyone is going to think you're crazy and everyone is going to hate you. And this was a threat quite early on if I left. But you have to ignore that because you have to leave. Like, you don't have a choice. And so he enacted that plan and tried to do all those things. And it's... And so, and he even said, I'll get your nursing registration. And so he was determined that, with the threats to smash his head on a brick wall and convince the police I did it. And, he's scratching his face and hurting his wrists and saying, oh, she did that. So all those lies, he was hoping he could manipulate the system to give me an assault charge. And then he was going to report that to my nursing registration board and try and have my registration taken off me because it's going to financially impact me. It's that control and that, well, you need me now, don't you? Because you have nothing. It's like, no, I don't need you. You took away everything. There's no logic in anything they do. It's so sick. Because it's only nearly 16 minutes in, I will give an example, but I think I'm just trying to find what works best. And I think that if I have the episode on a topic like financial abuse, I should have my examples of financial abuse in the Storytime episode that week to make it all the one topic. But then I think if it's just an episode about it and I'm not bringing in my own examples, how boring. Like, you could just Google that information yourself. Like, I'm like, I need to provide like real experiences to talk about it, to share it. Then again, I could be a professional and not talk about personal experiences like professionals do, but I'm the most unprofessional health professional. So that's not an option. Trust me, I've tried to grow up. I've tried to be professional. I've tried to not be ADHD. And the more I try, the more I have to be me. And people don't like it. So, sorry. My bad. So I will provide some examples just from that one relationship. But I have this other relationship where I want to actually talk about so much of it. And this will go for like 40, 50 minutes if I do that. So I think I might make that in the next one. So that'll be this other person and how they convinced me to live with them and pay for everything and was stealing money. And it's a whole thing. So tune in. And that isn't that same abuser. It's one that is equally as bad. Yes, I have met two very evil people in my life and I don't know what in the juju's going on, but it's out of control and it doesn't make sense. Okay, so I'll just tell you about that recent, worst DV abuser. He convinced me at the start to break a lease and move in with him. And I said, well, I can't because I have this much rent per week and I have to pay that much rent till they find a new tenant. And this is back when we weren't in a rental crisis. Right now we're in a rental crisis in Australia where rentals are never empty and there's a queue of people wanting them. Like, people cannot find places to live. This is well before that. So I had to pay full rent on this property until a new tenant came, and it literally took months. And so I said, no, I'm not going to break my lease because I can't afford to pay full rent there plus half of his. He lived in this government subsidized place where he paid very, 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 I've never heard of someone paying that little. It's basically what you'd probably call housing commission in Australia. And he was paying, I've never, like 120 a week or something like that. Like, it was so low, very subsidized, specific place. And I said, no, I'm not going to move in with you. For a start, I wasn't going to live in that place. It was too small. I was actually going to buy a place. So I was going to stay there temporarily while I look for somewhere to buy. And of course, stupid me thought maybe he'll live with me when I buy a place. But it was a temporary thing. So I was never actually going to live there. But he was like, oh no, but come here now for the meantime and I'll just keep paying my rent as I am. Like, you don't have to pay me half of mine. Like, you're paying full rent. So I was paying 3 times the amount of rent he was per week to pay for this property. And I said, no, I can't do that because you're going to resent me. You're going to be like, well, you're not helping pay. And while I'm paying 3 times as much as him for this other property. And he said, no, like, that's fine. Come here. And every time he wanted control, every time he wanted to abuse me and bully me, he said, you owe me $5,000. It was always $5,000. You owe me for rent. You moved in and never paid rent. And it's like, yeah, I did. I was paying like 3 times the amount of rent you were paying. And we both agreed, and you really pushed me. Like, he really convinced me to do it, to leave that property, continue paying rent on that property. And I'm completely open and honest and showing him all the paperwork. And if you really want me to come, I just can't start paying until I finish paying there. And he said, and I'm like, you agreed to that? He's like, no, you still owe me. And just, they will convince you to do something and then use it against you. Never trust them. Anyone have trust issues. No, that's not healthy either. He damaged everything of value. He kicked, scratched, keyed, dented every panel of my vehicle over and over and gaslit me that it just happened at the grocery store. Every time I tried to say, please don't abuse me, or I think I have to leave this relationship because of the violence, he would sneak to my car and smash it. Smash part of it, smash one of the panels, key it. I watched him walk past it, keying it one day. And then I'm like, you just keyed my car. And he's like, no, I didn't. And I'd just seen him do it. I just saw you do it. And I have a recording on CCTV of you doing it. He's like, no, I didn't. I was just walking past. And I'm like, but I saw the literal insanity. So everything was damaged. And so I never thought this was financial abuse, but it is. It impacts you. And then me having to move far away to save my life from this person saying, I'm going to find you and kill you. I lost so much money. It cost me so much money to sort out my housing situation, to flee the violence. There are even payments that can help you, but it's nothing like removalists cost a lot. There's this company that used to be good and now they're really scammy, and they charge you by the hour and then only one works at a time, and they sit down just having smoko constantly. Smoko is a break. In Australia, smoko is where people will have a cigarette or a coffee or a drink or basically a break. And they're always on break. It was really scammy. They used to be this amazing company and I was like, oh, okay. So they charged thousands for not even much. Anyway, moving right along. The amount of money, so what you do if you've come out of a relationship, you think, okay, have I been through financial abuse? Well, look back. How much money did it take you to sort of get away or move? Or what was the financial impact of this whole relationship? And if I really think of that, it's ridiculous. And all the shifts I missed out on, I couldn't barely do the minimum of what was required of my permanent job because I couldn't pick up extras because I was sleep deprived. He used sleep deprivation to make me have a harder time at work and to wear me down and to, have control and power. So basically financial abuse is all about that control power. Can you believe he microwaved my work ID? I remember I went to work and I just couldn't get in. And then I looked at it and it smelt burnt. So he must have done it that morning when I wasn't looking. Who does it? And then when I was held hostage in my own home, and then when I was eventually released from hospital, I come home and the whole place stinks. Open the microwave and it just reeks of plastic, and there's a completely melted work ID. He put it on for many minutes this time. And it's you are so unwell, so unhinged, yet this person can convince people who know me that I'm hysterical, aggressive and crazy. I'm none of those things, and I did not deserve the way this person treated me ever. So all in all, they'll make a big deal when they spend 1 cent on you, and then they'll also resent you for it and make you pay for that. And they will lie to other people that they have financially supported you, and they haven't. And even looking back, to make up for me having to pay 3 times his rent to another property, even though we agreed on that, I still paid for all the groceries and everything. So I had to feed, and I can't tell you how many people were there because I don't want to give away identifying information. But yeah, I had to pay to feed a lot of, I've never paid a grocery bill like it in my life. So I kind of was. Yeah, I was paying the expenses. The grocery bill was more than his rent, but the whole, well, you owe me, it was just that, oh, okay, here we go. Last one. So basically with this guy, I'm just thinking of what is related to financial abuse and just throwing it out there and throwing it in the end of this episode. But I am going to have a separate episode about this other person that is more consistent and in a proper timeline, not just random thoughts and memories. But I have had one other random memory, how when I moved into, I think I have mentioned this, when I moved into my new place, it was my place that I owned, that he insisted on helping do things. I had to provide all the items, all the materials, and he would come and help for, I don't know, a few minutes. And then he tried to convince me that a tradie's rates are XYZ and therefore you owe me so many thousand for all my labor. Yet at the time I had said, no, I don't want you to help with that because you're not here for that. That's not your role in my life. Like, I will get someone to help with that. And he's like, no, I insist. I want to do it. And I'm like, no. And he would always use it against me. Well, you owe me for this. You owe me for that. And then he tried to say, I can take half of this house. And I'm like, you've never lived here. You've not lived here one iota. Like, what? You've not lived here. You don't live here. You haven't paid a cent. And he's like, oh, but I helped cut down some leaves in the yard. Therefore, I have helped renovate. Therefore, I can take half the house when you sell it because I have helped with, like, he tried to, like, the way they clutch at straws and the way they try and manipulate us to think things that are so not true. So I was in prison when I sold that property. I was in prison. Wrong person. He was in prison. Yes, not me, like he planned, like he wanted. It was him. He was in prison. I was in prison. He was in prison when I sold it, and I was, and I told the real estate person how he lied that he could claim any of it. And she's like, what the hell is wrong with him? And I'm like, this person that never lived there, that always made a show when the neighbours were there. So he said he wanted the neighbours to think he lived there. So he'd always make sure they saw him when he visited. And so they did. They started thinking he lived there. And I'm like, so he's manipulating so he could have them to say, look, they're witnesses that I lived there. So I own half of, like, that kind of drama. Like, don't even come, mate. Like, oh, where's your $1 payment to the mortgage? Like, the absolute manipulation. But the thing is, if he could have, he would have. If legally he could have taken, and that's the thing, if I had allowed him to move into my home that I owned, well, had a big mortgage on because maybe not rich. If I had allowed him to move into that, he would have done everything legally to take half. And he was trying, but the good thing was he didn't fit. And I can't say why, how many plus ones he had, if you know what I mean. But the good thing was that there was no space and renovations had to happen before that could happen. And so praise the Lord that I never invited him to live there, because if he had, he would have said, well, I've been living there. I own half of this property now. And even if he couldn't win, he still would have gone through court and he would have done everything he could and he would have got legal aid. So luckily I hadn't had him living with me, but that could have very well happened. Honestly, it could have happened and I could have lost everything. I had scrunged, like, to get a house deposit for this teeny tiny house in this very lower socio suburb just to own a property. I had to be so tight, like really like saving it, and I didn't even have a good deposit. Like, it was hard work, and to think I could have lost literally everything. And even moving I kind of did, because the market went really bad and I had to pay so much more for even crappier place in the end when I moved away. But yeah, so financial abuse, it's all coercive control. And if you do what I've done today and you go over a relationship, you might be like, oh yeah, they did financially impact me. Whereas in the next episode, I'm going to give a story time where it's a little bit more clearer, a little bit more obvious. But everything's in hindsight, really. At the time, they gaslight you and you actually buy it. Anyway, that's enough. At the end of the day, All we have to do is have our wits about us, stay safe, have a voice, blast social media with comments against misogyny, against patriarchy, against things that create these ideas that women are products that should serve and should be controlled. Shout it louder, accept if you're in an unsafe situation, risk assess and get out and get safe. And then be kind to yourself. It's not your fault. None of it was your fault. Love your legends. Bye.